We're here for the 7th in a 52-part series as we journey week by week through the Daily Stoic. Now, I hope that this series does not replace someone reading the book, though I do not think that it is necessary to read the book to follow along with the series. That said, I'm only highlighting a very small portion of the book, so there's a lot more stuff in here worth having in your life than what I am putting on the channel. That said, pardon me, there are 2 days from this week that I want to sort of highlight. The first is February 13th. The subtitle for February 13th is Pleasure Can Become Punishment. It sounds like something you might find on Pornhub, but we're not getting to that part of this discussion. Speaking of Pornhub, the quote comes to us from Epictetus, so just know that. So February 13th, from Epictetus in the Enchiridion 34. I know exactly what I'm talking about. Trust me, I've read it. Whenever you get an impression of some pleasure, as with any impression, guard yourself from being carried away by it. Let it await your action. Give yourself a pause. After that, bring to mind both times. First, when you have enjoyed the pleasure, and later, when you will regret it and hate yourself. Then compare to the joy. Struggling here. Then compare to those the joy and satisfaction you'd feel for abstaining altogether. However, if a seemingly appropriate time arises to act on it, don't be overcome by its comfort, pleasantness, and allure. But against all of this, how much better the consciousness of conquering it. Again, that is from Epictetus. And the little blurb that we get from our authors here. Self-control is a difficult thing, no question, which is why a popular trick from dieting might be helpful. Some diets allow a, quote, cheat day, end quote, 1 day per week in which the dieter can eat anything and everything they want. Indeed, they're encouraged to write a list during the week of all the foods they craved, so that they can enjoy them all at once as a treat. The thinking being that if you're eating healthy 6 of 7 days a week, you're still ahead. At first, this sounds like a dream. But anyone who's actually done this knows the truth. Each cheat day, you eat yourself sick and hate yourself afterward. Soon enough, you're willingly abstaining from cheating at all, because you don't need it, and you definitely don't want it. It's not unlike a parent teaching her child with cigarettes and forcing him to smoke the whole pack. It's important so that is probably something that no one does anymore, but my generation definitely suffered at the hands of that little trick. It's important to connect the so-called temptation with its actual effects. Once you understand that indulging might actually be worse than resisting, the urge begins to lose its appeal. In this way, self-control becomes a real pleasure, and the temptation becomes the regret. So the question that I have here, I agree with this almost wholeheartedly, but the question that I do have here, and I do mean this as a question, if you have an answer, let me know, because this is something with which I struggle mightily. What's the correct balance? So, a cheat day once per week, if you do that, you're still messing up, 13% of the time, 13% of the time? 13% of the time, you're doing the exact opposite of whatever your goal is. That is probably excessive. They say that if you want to be a writer, you have to write every day. Counter to this, I can't remember where the interview happened. I don't know if I read it or saw it or just heard it, but you'll have to take my word for this. There was an interview with Chuck Palahniuk, and the interviewer asked him, so do you write every day? You write all these novels. This was when he was in the hot part of his career. They asked him, do you write every day? How do you do this? And he said, okay, so pretend you don't have to go to the bathroom. Do you go sit on the toilet? Writing is the same way. So that's what works for him. That's what works for Chuck Palahniuk. I doubt very heavily that is actually what works for Chuck Palahniuk. I would bargain to wager. I would wager to bargain. I would bet that there are days Chuck Palahniuk, in his career as a writer, does not feel like writing, but still sits down to write. However, the thing I struggle with is that I think when you abstain from things completely, when you start abstaining from things, it's very addictive. When you say, I'm not going to eat pizza anymore because pizza is really my problem. I'm gaining all this weight because every Thursday I love that pizza buffet. And maybe on Saturdays I'll go ahead and order a pizza. So, to sort of circumvent this, I'm going to forego pizza entirely. It's a good idea. It'll work. It'll work great. But then you say, well, hey, I'm getting all of these results from just not eating pizza. What if I cut out the ramen noodles too? It's probably a good idea. Ramen noodles are terrible for you. So, cut those two things out. What if I force myself to drink 128 ounces of water a day, an entire gallon? What if I do that? You're going to see results. But what happens is you tweak and tweak and tweak and tweak and tweak until 100% of the time, what you're doing is something you don't want to do. All you want is a slice of pizza and a pint of beer. And when you break, you don't just break, you crack. That's what happens to me. I start doing all these things, and what happens is abstaining from different things, or forcing myself into different things, trying to do this, do that, work out, or I'm going to run 3 miles every day, or I'm going to make a video every day, this sort of thing. The work becomes insurmountable. The work becomes what it is that is prohibitive. So where is the line? So for me personally, right now, I'm coming up on about 10 months straight. Not every week, but I would say, so if you're looking at 4 or 5 weeks per month, you're looking at 9 weeks every 2 months. 7 of 9 weeks, easily, working 6 or 7 days. 10 months of that. I'm starting to wear down. During the beginning portion of this, we're going all the way back to May, June. May, I started working out again, in earnest. June, I walked/ran over 100 miles. It's the first time I'd ever done that in my life in a single month. So July, I wanted to hit 140. And I did. In August, 150 or 160. In September, around that same amount. In October, I topped 100. And in November, I topped 100 again. December, I think I hit, it was a lot of bad weather, but I still walked every day. So there was 100 days straight that I walked or ran, 110 or something, I don't remember. But I do this thing where I just delve into things at the expense of almost everything else. So during that time, I was still writing, but if you were subscribed to this channel or if you follow me on Strip Cover Lit, you know, wasn't a whole lot of videos during that time. Right now, in January, I made a video every day. I wrote every day. I'm working on a novel. So I did both of those things every day, but I've walked, but I haven't been to the gym. I haven't worked out in earnest, right? So where is the line? So when I cracked and I stopped walking, there was a snowstorm and I couldn't get out for a couple of days. So I came home and I switched gears and I made more videos and I did more writing. I am having trouble in my life hitting all areas of life every day. I delve into things at the expense of other things. I think this is something that is how do I want to say this? In the same way that getting a little bit of bad things, your cheat day in a diet, can ruin you, so too can too much of the productive things in your life be ruinous. And where is that balance? Where do we find that balance? How do we find that balance? Do we have to find that balance every day? Because like I said, I think it's not just me. There's nothing special about me. This is going to be a large number of people watching this. There's not a large number of people watching this, but if you are watching this, probably this is you too. When you set these goals, you may falter once or twice. But eventually, if it is a goal that you do not, with which you do not succeed, at which you do not succeed, there comes a point where you just buckle. That's what I struggle with. The next day that I want to talk about here for this week is February 16th. The subtitle here being, Don't Make Things Harder Than They Need to Be. Again, this is something that the discussion we just had, if you sort of think about that with this entry, there's a lot of overlap. But there's something else I want to talk about here as well that's sort of getting into a theme with this series. Don't make things harder than they are. February 16th, the quote comes to us from Marcus Aurelius in Meditations. If someone asks you how to write your name, would you bark out each letter? And if they get angry, would you then return the anger? Wouldn't you rather gently spell out each letter for them? So then, remember in life that your duties are the sum of individual acts. Pay attention to each of these as you do your duty. Just methodically complete your task. Take the emotions out of it. Take the fee-fees away. There is, I think, a whole lot of warrant behind this. But the blurb from our authors here, here's a common scenario. You're working with a frustrating coworker or a difficult boss. They ask you to do something and, because you dislike the messenger, you immediately object. There's this problem or that one, or their request is obnoxious and rude. So you tell them, no, I'm not going to do it. Then they retaliate by not doing something that you had previously asked of them. And so the conflict escalates. Meanwhile, if you could take a step back and see it objectively, you'd probably see that not everything they're asking for is unreasonable. In fact, some of it is pretty easy to do or is at least agreeable. And if you did it, it might make the rest of the tasks a bit more tolerable too. Pretty soon, you've done the entire thing. Life, and our job, is difficult enough. Let's not make it harder by getting emotional about insignificant matters or digging in for battles we don't actually care about. Let's not let emotion get in the way of kathekaton, kathekon, 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 the simple and appropriate action on the path to virtue. This reminds me of two things. Number one, there's the old adage about, I don't remember, someone meditating in the middle of a pond. They're in their serene state. Suddenly, a bullfrog jumps into the water and causes ripples. Those ripples, they sort of bug the hell out of our meditator. So, the person meditating reaches out in an attempt to flatten the water. Well, if you do that, you're not flattening the water, you're creating waves in the other direction. And then he tried to flatten those waves, and then those waves. The point being that if you put effort into this disturbance, all it does is grow. The answer to that conundrum, this too shall pass. I think the best way that I can think of to conceptualize this, to really sort of put maybe a visual cue on it, is to realize the toxicity or radioactive nature of negative emotions. So think back to some moment in your life that you blew up, that you got mad when you shouldn't have. You didn't have to. You got mad at someone else. You started acting in a manner that was sort of nasty, sort of belligerent. And if you imagine yourself from the third person in your memory, you outside of yourself looking at you as radioactive, as toxic, literally in your memory, turn yourself red with weird green waves coming off of you. Or there's that The Simpsons episode where Mr. Burns, they think they've got an alien, but it's Mr. Burns, who is radioactive, walking through the woods at night. It was the one with the X-Files on it. Spoilers for a 30-year-old cartoon. This is a way to conceptualize that memory that shows you how silly you looked. All emotions, I think, leach off into other areas of life. But those iterations of emotion that are negative, anger or self-doubt, things like that, when you are passing off the half-life of that emotion, it only serves to injure another portion of your life. Rare is the occasion where a positive emotion actually does you damage when you carry it from one place of life to another. So imagine you have a good day at work. You get twice the amount of work done that your boss had allotted for you. Got a little extra pep in your step. You're standing up a little straighter. You go out to a date after work. That's going to correspond positively. If instead you had a terrible day at work, you woke up late, you showed up late, your boss was mad at you because of it, a customer threatened to beat you up because he didn't like the way you were looking at him, all of these things, and then you go and you have a date after work, or you try to, whatever your creative endeavor is, you're making videos, or you're writing, or you're painting, that too will negatively affect the next station of your life. This is something that happens to me too often. Get beat up by the day, come home, can't produce, can't make a video, can't write, can't edit anything, can't read constructively, any of these sorts of things. However, that said, that they are the negative emotions which absolutely destroy your next phase of life, your next life station. Not even your next life station, your next station of life, the very place where you're at. You start having a terrible day at work. How useful would it be? Wipe the emotions away. Don't make things harder than they need to be. Don't make things more difficult, more pressing than they need to be. At the same time, while and whereas they are these negative emotions that so dangerously affect and radiate into different areas of life. So imagine that. You get your writing in after work, or your time with your child. We'll say it that way. You interact with you set aside an hour a day that you're going to play with your child. You're going to have that emotional interaction with your child, which, by the way, sounds like very little. It's more than a whole lot of people do. If you were to do that, you would very positively impact your child's life. I think we can all agree that. But pretend that 1 hour per day that you directly interact with your child, imagine that's immediately after work, and you hate your job, and the drive home is terrible, and every day you got to stop to get gas because you live so far away, and the scummy, pump, you got to wash it off, all these negative things. Then you come home, hey, Billy, let's throw the ball, huh? You want to throw the ball? Let's throw the ball. How terrible would that be for your child? Your child would grow to hate you. If every day you come home from work, you have your creative action, you want to write your novel, but work sucks, and it gets you tired. By the time you come back around to edit that novel, it's going to be a bunch of garbage. It's going to be a bunch of garbage. So the best thing to be able to do in these situations, just wipe your emotions off. Now, in the same breath, when I said that the negative emotions are the ones which so greatly hinder progress in life, imagine you love work, you love your job, and people always all day long telling you how funny you are, telling you how brilliant you are, telling you how good you're doing at work. You come home to write that novel. Not going to be a whole lot of critical thought behind it. You come home to do your homework. Real hard to sit down for some algebra when you're feeling great about yourself, right? So if you were able to sort of wipe away those positive emotions too, and take whatever it is that is there at face value for what it is you're supposed to be doing, that's powerful. There is something called presentness. It is something which is noted as being greatly enhanced by people who meditate. You meditate, and the next thing you do in life, you're there, baby. You're present. You're talking to someone, you're noticing all of the facial stuff, you're noticing their posture, however it is they're standing. You're present, you're with them, you're there. You are very now, you are very centered. If you were able to recenter yourself, become re-present, at a moment's notice. Literally, Marcus Aurelius Meditations, right? This is one of those things that is a Stoic practice, which is present in Eastern philosophies as well, and even something so, I hate to say generic, but something so generic as meditation. The ability to be present. Being present is in effect almost nothing more than not allowing other instances of you to affect the current iteration of you. Being present is almost by definition the ability to wipe away all of those emotions, good or bad. That is all I have for this episode of the Daily Stoic. I hope to have you back next week for the 8th installment in the series. And hey guys, if you hit that like button, it really helps me out here on the channel. But what I would really enjoy is hearing your interactions so far with the text. What are the things that have stood out to you? What are the things that you are trying to incorporate in your life? What are the entries that have really made you recenter yourself? And whatnot. So again, that's all I have for this episode, and I hope to see you back next week.